I stared at the spreadsheet on my screen, the numbers blurring together. It was 7:45 p.m. on a Friday, and the office was nearly empty. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound accompanying the rhythmic clicking of my mouse. I had been working at Apex Logistics for 5 years. When I started, we were a small team handling local shipments. Now, we were a massive operation shipping across the entire country. I had built the tracking system from scratch. I knew every route, every driver, and every client quirk by heart. My salary, however, had stayed stuck in the past. I had missed the last 3 Christmas parties because I was fixing server crashes. I had skipped family dinners to ensure the Redford account, our biggest client, didn't walk away during a crisis. I was tired. Not just physically but deep in my bones. I knew my worth even if the company seemed to have forgotten it. I had spent the last week preparing a presentation. It wasn't just about asking for more money, it was about showing them that I was the glue holding the operation together. I saved the file, shut down my computer, and took a deep breath. Monday morning I was going to ask for what I deserved. I didn't know it then, but that weekend would be the last peaceful one I would have for a long time. The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety and rehearsal. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, practicing my pitch. I didn't want to sound greedy, but I needed to be firm. Inflation was rising, my rent had gone up, and I was doing the work of 3 people. My wife, Emily, sat on the edge of the bathtub, listening to me repeat the same sentences over and over. "Just tell him the facts, James," she said softly. "You saved them $2 million last year. If they don't see that, they are blind." She was right. I had the data. I had printed out charts showing the efficiency spike since I took over the logistics department. I had emails from clients praising my specific interventions. I wasn't asking for a mansion, I was asking for a fair market rate. But there was a knot in my stomach I couldn't untie. My boss, Mr. Holloway, wasn't a bad man, or so I thought. He was just new. He had been brought in 6 months ago to streamline operations. He wore expensive suits and used a lot of buzzwords, but I wasn't sure he actually knew how our trucks got from point A to point B. He looked at spreadsheets, not people. I hoped the numbers I had prepared would speak his language. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and a heavy rain that matched my mood. I arrived at the office 30 minutes early. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as I walked to my cubicle. The office felt cold. I arranged my papers in a neat stack: the performance review, the client testimonials, and the salary comparison chart. I wanted everything to be perfect. My heart beat a little faster when I saw Mr. Holloway walk in. He didn't look at me, he was talking loudly on his phone, laughing about a golf game. I waited until 10 a.m., our scheduled meeting time. I knocked on his glass door. He waved me in without looking up from his computer. I sat in the chair opposite his massive oak desk, feeling small. The office smelled of strong coffee and expensive cologne. "So, James," he said finally, swiveling his chair around to face me. He had a fake smile plastered on his face. "You wanted to chat? Make it quick, I have a lunch meeting with the board at noon." His tone was dismissive, like I was a distraction rather than a key team member. I cleared my throat, opened my folder, and began to speak. "Mr. Holloway, thank you for seeing me," I started, my voice steady despite my nerves. "I've been with Apex for 5 years. In that time, I've overseen a 200% increase in shipping volume." I slid the first chart across the desk. He glanced at it briefly but didn't pick it up. I continued, listing my achievements. I talked about the new routing software I had implemented, which cut fuel costs by 15%. I mentioned how I personally handled the Redford account when their previous manager quit. "I am dedicated to this company," I said, locking eyes with him. "But my compensation hasn't changed in 3 years. Based on my contributions and the current market rate for a senior logistics manager, I am asking for a 20% raise." I waited. The silence in the room was heavy. I expected a negotiation. I expected him to say, "Let me check the budget," or "20 is high, how about 10? I was ready to compromise. I just wanted to be acknowledged. Holloway leaned back in his chair, interlacing his fingers behind his head. He looked at the ceiling, then back at me. The smile on his face shifted into something else, something mocking. He didn't look impressed. He looked amused. Then it happened. The reaction I had never anticipated. Mr. Holloway laughed. It wasn't a nervous chuckle or a polite cough. It was a loud, barking laugh that echoed off the glass walls. He shook his head, wiping a tear from his eye. "A raise?" he wheezed, still chuckling. "James, look at you. You move boxes on a screen. You think that's worth a 20% hike?" He leaned forward, his face suddenly serious, the laughter gone as quickly as it had come. "Let me tell you something about the real world. Everyone is replaceable. The software does the work, not you. You're just the guy who pushes the buttons. I sat frozen. The blood drained from my face. It wasn't just a rejection, it was a total invalidation of my existence at the company. He didn't see the late nights. He didn't see the crisis management. To him, I was nothing more than a warm body in a chair. I can hire a college grad to do your job for half your current salary, Holloway added, checking his watch. Is that all? Because if you're unhappy, you know where the door is. He turned back to his computer screen, dismissing me completely. He started typing, signaling the meeting was over. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was strangely clear. The knot in my stomach was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I looked at Holloway's back. He hadn't even waited for me to leave the room before ignoring me. The disrespect was palpable. He truly believed the company ran on autopilot. He truly believed the software was magic. He didn't know that the software was buggy and that I manually corrected the routing codes every single morning at 6 a.m. He didn't know that the Redford account only stayed because I answered their calls on Sundays. I walked out of his office and closed the door gently. The click of the latch sounded like a gunshot in the quiet office. I walked back to my desk. My hands weren't shaking. I looked at the family photo on my desk, then at the stacks of files I managed. I realized then that I wasn't just an employee to him, I was a cost he wanted to cut. He had bluffed, thinking I would be too scared to leave. He thought I needed Apex more than Apex needed me. He was wrong. I sat down, opened a blank email, and typed 2 words in the subject line: resignation letter. The rest of the day was a surreal experience. I continued to work, but I was on autopilot. I watched my colleagues rushing around, stressed and overworked. I felt a strange sense of pity for them. They were still trapped in the illusion that hard work would be rewarded here. I kept my resignation email in the drafts folder. I wanted to do this right. I wasn't going to cause a scene. I was going to follow the protocol exactly. I read through my employment contract. 2 weeks' notice was required. I would give them exactly that. Not a minute less, not a minute more. I started quietly organizing my personal files. I deleted my personal browsing history. I removed my personal contacts from the company database. I made sure that anything that belonged to me was backed up on a thumb drive. I didn't touch the company data, I was a professional. But I also didn't write down the cheat codes, I used to keep the system running. The manual overrides, the contact numbers for the warehouse managers who only picked up for me, the specific ways to calm down Mr. Redford, those were in my head. Holloway said the software did the work. I decided to let him test that theory. At 5 p.m. sharp, I hit send. The email went to Holloway and HR. I packed my bag, put on my coat, and walked to the elevator. As I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed. It was a notification that the email had been opened. I didn't stop. I walked out into the rain, feeling the water hit my face. It felt cleansing. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't check my email on the train ride home. I didn't worry about the overnight shipments. When I got home, I told Emily everything. She listened, her eyes wide. He laughed? She asked, outraged. He actually laughed? I nodded. He thinks I'm useless, I said. So I'm going to let him see what useless looks like. We sat at the kitchen table looking at our finances. It would be tight. We had savings for about 3 months. It was a risk. But the alternative, staying with a man who laughed at my livelihood, was impossible. I slept better that night than I had in years. I knew the storm was coming, but for the first time, I wasn't the one standing in the rain. I was the one watching from the window. The next morning, Holloway called me into his office the moment I arrived. He wasn't laughing this time. He looked annoyed, like I was a rebellious teenager acting out. I got your email, he said, leaning back in his chair. This is very dramatic, James. Are you trying to leverage a counteroffer? Because I told you there is no budget. He looked at me over the rim of his glasses, expecting me to fold. Expecting me to apologize and beg for my job back. No, Mr. Holloway, I said calmly. I am resigning. My last day will be 2 weeks from today. I will spend that time handing over my duties. Holloway scoffed. Handing over? Just leave the files on the server. Like I said, anyone can do this job. If you want to leave, leave. But don't expect a reference from me. He waved his hand dismissively. Honestly, you're doing me a favor. Now I can hire 2 juniors for your price. He was digging his own grave with every word, and he didn't even know it. Understood, I said. I walked out. He thought he had won. He thought he had bullied me out. He had no idea what he had just lost. The notice period was excruciatingly slow. Holloway ignored me completely. He didn't assign anyone to shadow me. He didn't ask for a handover meeting. In his mind, the system was perfect and I was just an operator. I spent the days doing the bare minimum. I answered emails, I tracked shipments, but I stopped doing the extras. I stopped the manual overrides on the routing bugs. I stopped calling the drivers to warn them about traffic. I stopped fixing the billing errors that the automated system generated. Small cracks began to appear immediately. A shipment to Ohio was delayed by a day because the software didn't account for a road closure I usually flagged. A client called to complain about a wrong invoice. Holloway didn't notice yet. He was too busy planning his next golf trip. My colleagues noticed though. Paul, a junior logistics coordinator, came to my desk. "James, the system is acting weird," he whispered. "It's sending trucks to the old warehouse." "You'll have to ask Holloway," I said gently. "I'm just the guy who pushes buttons." Paul looked worried, but he walked away. I felt a twinge of guilt, but I reminded myself of the laughter. 1 week into my notice, the first major issue occurred. The Redford account had a complex shipment of fragile medical equipment. Usually, I handled this personally, calling the specific drivers who I knew were careful. This time, I let the automated system assign it. The system assigned it to a standard freight hauler, not the specialized team. I watched it happen on the screen. I could have stopped it with one click. I hesitated. My finger hovered over the mouse. Then I remembered Holloway's face. "You're just the guy who pushes buttons." I took my hand off the mouse. I let the system do its job exactly as Holloway wanted. The shipment went out. I knew that in 3 days when it arrived, there would be broken equipment and a furious client. But that wouldn't be my problem. I was leaving in 4 days. Holloway still hadn't hired a replacement. He told the team that he would absorb my duties until he found someone cheaper. He had no idea he was absorbing a ticking time bomb. 3 days before I left, I cleaned out my desk. I found old thank you cards from clients, awards for Employee of the Month from the old management, and notes from drivers. It was sad to see 5 years of my life packed into a single cardboard box. I walked around the office saying goodbye to the few people I liked. Most were too scared to talk to me, afraid that Holloway would see them associating with the traitor. I approached Holloway's office one last time to ask about the handover keys and passwords. "Just email them to me," he shouted through the closed door. He didn't even let me in. So I did. I drafted a document with the basic passwords. I didn't include the emergency contacts. I didn't include the workaround instructions for the software bugs. I gave him exactly what he asked for, the keys to the car but not the knowledge of how to drive it on an icy road. I sent the email. My conscience was clear. I had offered to help and I had been rejected. My last day was a Friday. The office was buzzing with the usual end-of-week chaos. I sat at my desk watching the clock tick toward 5 p.m. At 4:45 p.m., a notification popped up on the main dashboard. Error 404, routing server timeout. This happened every Friday afternoon due to high traffic. Usually, I rebooted the secondary server manually to balance the load. It took 2 minutes. Today I just watched the red light blink. At 5 p.m. I stood up. I put on my coat and picked up my box. The red light was still blinking. The system was slowing down. Emails were getting stuck in the outbox. I walked to the elevator. Paul looked at me, panic in his eyes. "James, the server is lagging," he said. "Have a good weekend, Paul," I said with a smile. I walked out of the building. The sun was shining. I felt lighter than air. I handed my ID badge to the security guard in the lobby. "Take care, James," he said. "You too, Mike," I replied. I walked out the door and didn't look back. Saturday morning felt strange. Usually, I would be checking my phone for updates on the weekend deliveries. Today, my phone was silent. I had blocked the office numbers on my personal cell. I made pancakes for Emily. We went for a long walk in the park. It was the first time in years I had been fully present. I wasn't thinking about trucks or crates. I was just James. But while I was enjoying the peace, chaos was erupting at apex. I knew it. The Friday evening server lag would have turned into a full weekend crash. Without the manual reboot, the orders would pile up. The drivers wouldn't get their new routes for Monday. The Redford shipment with the broken medical equipment was due to arrive that afternoon. I could imagine the phone ringing in the empty office. I could imagine Holloway on the golf course, ignoring the buzzing in his pocket until it was too late. I took a sip of my coffee and smiled. Monday arrived. I was officially unemployed. I sat in my living room updating my resume. At 9:15 a.m. my home landline rang. We rarely used it, so few people had the number. I looked at the caller ID. Apex Logistics. They were calling my house because I wasn't answering my cell. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. 10 minutes later it rang again. And again. I listened to the voicemail later. It was Paul. His voice was trembling. "James, please pick up. We can't log in. The system locked us out. Mr. Holloway is screaming at everyone. We don't know the admin code." I deleted the message. I wasn't an employee anymore. I wasn't on the payroll. I had no obligation to fix their problems. I went back to my resume. I had an interview lined up for Wednesday with a competitor, Blue Streak Shipping. They had been trying to headhunt me for years, but I had been too loyal to leave. That loyalty seemed foolish now. By Tuesday, the situation at Apex must have reached critical mass. I received an email on my personal account from Holloway. The subject line was, "Urgent. System failure. No, dear James, no please. Just a demand. The system is down. Send the override codes immediately. This is unprofessional." I laughed. The irony was sweet. He was calling me unprofessional after laughing in my face? I replied 2 hours later. "Dear Mr. Holloway, all relevant passwords were provided in my handover email on my final day. I no longer have access to company systems. Best regards, James." I hit send. I knew the passwords I gave him were for the user interface, not the admin backend. He didn't know the difference because he never bothered to learn the system. He was locked out of his own company because he thought the buttons pushed themselves. Wednesday was my interview with Blue Streak. The manager, a woman named Sarah, was professional and kind. She looked at my resume and whistled. "You ran the entire Western Division's logistics on that old legacy system?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "It required a lot of manual maintenance." She laughed. "I bet. We switched to the cloud years ago. We'd love to have someone with your work ethic here." The interview went perfectly. They offered me a position on the spot. The salary was 30% higher than what I was making at Apex. Plus benefits. Plus a signing bonus. I accepted. I walked out of the Blue Streak building feeling like $1,000,000. As I got into my car, my phone rang again. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered it. "James? It's Mr. Redford." My blood ran cold. The biggest client. "Mr. Redford, hello," I said, my voice professional. "I'm actually not with Apex anymore." "I know," Redford snapped, though his anger wasn't directed at me. "I just found out. I also found out why $500,000 of medical equipment arrived shattered at my facility on Saturday. Holloway is trying to blame a system glitch." I told him the only glitch is him. Redford took a breath. "James, you were the only reason we stayed with Apex. Your personal attention saved us dozens of times. Where are you going?" "Because wherever you go, my account goes with you." I was stunned. "I just accepted an offer at Blue Streak," I said. "Good," Redford replied. "Tell them to expect a call from my lawyers to draft a new contract. I'm leaving Apex today." He hung up. I sat in the car staring at the phone. Holloway had just lost the company's biggest revenue source. Thursday morning. I was set to start at Blue Streak the following Monday. I was enjoying my last few days of freedom. Then the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Holloway standing on my porch. He looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes were red, and he hadn't shaved. The arrogance was gone, replaced by desperation. It was a shocking transformation for a man who had laughed at me less than a month ago. "James," he said, his voice hoarse. "Can I come in?" I stood in the doorway blocking his path. "I don't think that's a good idea, Mr. Holloway. What do you want?" He swallowed hard. "The company is freezing up. Redford pulled his contract. 2 other clients are threatening to sue. The drivers are striking because the payroll system glitched. I need you back." He tried to smile, but it looked painful. "I can offer you that raise now. The 20%. We can sign it today." I looked at him, really looked at him. This man had belittled me. He had told me I was easily replaceable. Now he was standing on my porch begging. "It's not about the money anymore, Mr. Holloway," I said quietly. "You laughed at me. You told me a college kid could do my job. Why don't you hire one of them to fix it?" He flinched. "I made a mistake, okay? I didn't know how involved the system was. I didn't know about the manual overrides. Please, James. I'm going to lose my job if I don't fix this by Friday." "I'm sorry," I said, not feeling sorry at all. "I've already accepted a position at Blue Streak. I start Monday." His face went pale. "Blue Streak? You're going to the competition?" "Yes," I said. "And Mr. Redford is coming with me." Holloway looked like he had been punched in the gut. He stumbled back a step. You can't do that, he whispered. That's sabotage. No, I said firmly. That's the free market. You said it yourself. Everyone is replaceable. Well, Apex was replaceable too. I started to close the door. He put his hand out. Wait, I'll double it. Double your old salary. Right now. It was a desperate, flailing attempt. Go home, Mr. Holloway, I said. It's over. I closed the door. I watched him through the peephole. He stood there for a long time, shoulders slumped, looking at his expensive shoes. Then he turned and walked slowly back to his luxury car. It was the walk of a defeated man. I went back to the kitchen where Emily was making tea. Who was that? She asked. Nobody, I said. Just a ghost from the past. I started at Blue Streak on Monday. The difference was night and day. The systems worked. The management was respectful. When I told them I was bringing the Redford account with me, they treated me like a hero. I was given a corner office and a team of 3 assistants. I wasn't just pushing buttons anymore, I was building a department. A week later, I heard the news about Apex. The board of directors had held an emergency meeting. The loss of the Redford account, combined with the operational collapse, had caused the stock price to tank. They launched an internal investigation. They found that Holloway had ignored multiple warnings from the IT department and had failed to replace key personnel, me. The savings he had promised were actually just stripped assets that led to failure. It didn't take long for the final domino to fall. I was having lunch with a former colleague, Paul, who had also jumped ship to a different company. You heard about Holloway? Paul asked, biting into a sandwich. He got fired yesterday. Escorted out by security. The board was furious. They realized he had no idea how the company actually ran. I nodded, sipping my drink. I didn't feel triumph exactly. I just felt a sense of balance. Karma had done its work. Who's running the department now? I asked. They brought back the old director from retirement as a consultant, Paul said. But it's a mess. It's going to take them months to fix the database corruption. You really held that place together, James? I just did my job, I said. Until I wasn't allowed to anymore. 6 months later, my life was completely different. I was earning nearly double my old salary. We had moved to a nicer apartment. I was home by 6 p.m. every day. The stress that had plagued me for 5 years was gone. I was respected. I was valued. I realized that Holloway's laughter had been the best thing that ever happened to me. It woke me up. It forced me to see that I was settling for less than I was worth. If he had given me that 20% raise, I would still be there, stressed out, working late nights for a company that didn't care. His arrogance had set me free. I sometimes wondered where he was. I heard rumors he was having trouble finding a new executive role. Word travels fast in the logistics industry. No one wanted to hire the man who crashed Apex. One afternoon, I was walking into a coffee shop downtown. I saw a man sitting in the corner, hunched over a laptop. It was Holloway. He looked older, tired. He was scrolling through job listings. I paused for a second. He looked up and saw me. For a moment, our eyes met. There was no arrogance left in him. Just shame. He quickly looked back down at his screen, pretending he hadn't seen me. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to gloat. I just ordered my coffee and walked out into the sunshine. The silence that followed his laugh that day had been painful, but it was the silence of a bridge burning. And sometimes, you have to burn a bridge to stop yourself from crossing back to a place you don't belong. I took a sip of my coffee, checked my phone, and saw a message from my new boss. Great job on the quarterly review, James. Bonus approved. I smiled and kept walking. I had finally arrived. I thought the story ended there. I thought seeing Holloway defeated in a coffee shop was the final period at the end of a long sentence. But I was wrong. The silence that I had created by leaving Apex hadn't just confused Holloway, it had enraged him. A man like that, stripped of his power and his reputation, doesn't just fade away quietly. He lashes out. He looks for someone to blame for his own incompetence, and I was the perfect target. 3 weeks after I started at Blue Streak, on a Tuesday morning that seemed perfectly normal, I was called into the HR office. I wasn't worried. I assumed it was about benefits or tax forms. But when I walked in, Sarah, the manager who hired me, looked grim. Beside her sat a man in a dark suit I didn't recognize. James, have a seat, Sarah said, her voice tight. This is Mr. Henderson, our legal counsel. We received a cease and desist letter this morning, along with a notice of a lawsuit filed by Apex Logistics and Mr. Holloway. My heart hammered against my ribs. A lawsuit? For what? I asked, looking between Sarah and the lawyer. Mr. Henderson slid a thick document across the table. They are accusing you of corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets and breach of contract, he said calmly. Specifically, they claim you stole proprietary algorithms, the workarounds you mentioned, and that you conspired to poach the Redford account using stolen data. I felt the blood rush to my face. It was a lie. A desperate, malicious lie. That's insane, I said. I didn't steal anything. The Redford account followed me because they hated Holloway. And the algorithms were just me fixing their broken system manually. Henderson nodded slowly. We believe you, James. But Holloway is claiming that the manual fixes were actually intellectual property that belonged to Apex, and that by using your knowledge of them here, you are stealing their assets. It was a twisted logic, weaponizing my own hard work against me. What does this mean for my job? I asked, the fear of losing everything creeping back in. I had just started to feel safe. Now, Holloway was trying to reach out from his grave to pull me back down. Sarah leaned forward. James, we know Holloway's reputation. We know why Redford came here. We aren't going to fire you. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. However, Henderson added, we have to take this seriously. If we ignore it, they could get an injunction to stop you from working. We need to fight this, and we need to fight it hard. We need you to document everything you did in your final weeks at Apex. Every email, every conversation, every interaction with Holloway. Can you do that? Yes, I said, my voice hardening. I kept everything. Holloway had made a fatal error. He thought I was just a worker bee. He forgot that I was a manager who kept receipts. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at my computer, digging through the backups I had made of my personal correspondence. I found the resignation email. I found the handover email where I explicitly asked Holloway if he wanted a walkthrough, and his reply telling me to just leave the passwords. I found the text messages from Paul about the system crashing. Emily sat beside me organizing the papers. He's trying to bankrupt us with legal fees, isn't he? She asked quietly. He knows he can't win on facts, so he wants to win on cost. I nodded. He wants to scare me into a settlement. He wants me to admit I did something wrong so he can save face with his board. I looked at the stack of evidence. But I'm not settling. He laughed at me when I asked for a fair wage. Now he's going to cry when I prove him a liar in court. The legal process moved agonizingly slow. For the next month, a dark cloud hung over my head. I went to work, I did my job, but the joy was dampened by the looming deposition. Bluestreak's lawyers were aggressive, which helped. They demanded that Apex produce the server logs from the weeks after I left. They wanted proof that the stolen algorithms even existed. Of course, Apex couldn't produce them. Because the algorithms were just me waking up at 6 a.m. to type in codes. There was no software to steal. Holloway was claiming I stole a ghost. The date of the deposition arrived. I sat in a conference room facing Holloway for the first time since he stood on my porch. He looked smug again. He had a high-priced legal team, likely paid for by whatever favors he had left at the company. He thought he could intimidate me. He stared at me across the table, trying to make me look away. I didn't blink. Holloway's lawyer began the questioning. He tried to trap me with technical jargon. Mr. James, did you or did you not download the routing database onto a personal drive on your last day? No, I said clearly. I backed up my personal performance reviews and family photos. The forensic audit of my work laptop will confirm that. The lawyer frowned. He shuffled his papers. But you admit that you knew how to operate the system in a way that others did not? He pressed. Yes, I said. Because I read the manual and spent 5 years learning it. That's called experience, not theft. Holloway whispered something to his lawyer. The lawyer changed tactics. Did you solicit Mr. Redford to leave Apex before your employment ended? No, I replied. Mr. Redford called me after the system crashed because no one at Apex was answering the phone. He left because of incompetence, not solicitation. Then came the turning point. Our lawyer, Mr. Henderson, began to question Holloway. Mr. Holloway, you claim James stole proprietary fixes. Can you explain to us technically what those fixes were? Holloway froze. He looked at his lawyer, then at the stenographer. Well, they were complex coding structures, Holloway stammered. Complex coding structures, Henderson repeated. Interesting. Because we have an affidavit here from your current IT director. He states that there were no external codes. He states that the system failed simply because no one was manually clearing the cache, a task James performed daily. Did you know that was part of his job? I'm the manager, I don't know every detail, Holloway sweated. So, you fired the only person who knew how to maintain the system, refused his offer to train a replacement, and then sued him when the system broke? Henderson asked. The silence in the room was deafening. The deposition was a disaster for Holloway. By the time we broke for lunch, his lawyers looked furious with him. They realized he had lied to them about the nature of the theft. They thought they were chasing a hacker. They realized they were persecuting a whistleblower. During the break, Holloway's lawyer approached Henderson. I could see them talking in the hallway. Holloway stood off to the side looking at the floor. He looked smaller than ever. Henderson came back in. They want to settle, he told me. They will drop the lawsuit if we agree not to countersue for defamation. Each party pays their own legal fees. I looked at Holloway. He refused to meet my eyes. He just wanted it to end. He wanted to escape the humiliation of a public trial. No, I said. Sarah and Henderson looked at me. No settlement? Sarah asked. James, it's the easiest way out. He dragged my name through the mud, I said. He tried to get me fired from my new job. If we settle, he gets to walk away pretending it was a misunderstanding. I want him to admit it. I looked at Henderson. Tell them we will only accept a settlement if Holloway issues a formal written retraction. An apology, and Apex covers my legal fees. Henderson smiled. I like your style, James. He went back into the hallway. There was shouting. I heard Holloway's voice raised in anger, then his lawyer's voice, sharp and cutting. 10 minutes later they came back in. Holloway looked like he had swallowed a lemon. They agreed to the terms. The written apology arrived 2 days later. It was short, stiff, and clearly written by a lawyer, but it was a victory. Apex Logistics acknowledges that James acted with integrity and that no company property was misappropriated. We regret the misunderstanding. It was framed and put on my desk at Blue Streak. That piece of paper was worth more than the raise I had originally asked for. It was proof of my value. The lawsuit had backfired spectacularly on Holloway. The board of Apex, already furious about the lost clients, used the failed lawsuit and the legal fees as the final reason to terminate Holloway's contract for good. He wasn't just fired, he was blacklisted. He had cost the company millions in business and thousands in legal fees, all because his ego couldn't handle a simple request for a raise. Life settled into a new rhythm. The fear that had driven me for so long, the fear of poverty, the fear of losing my job, the fear of not being good enough, finally vanished. I realized that the security I thought I had at Apex was an illusion. Real security came from knowing your own worth and being willing to walk away when it wasn't recognized. One evening, about a year after the whole ordeal began, I received an email from Paul, my old colleague. He had finally left Apex too. You won't believe it, he wrote. Apex is being bought out. They couldn't recover from the last few quarters. Guess who's buying them? I clicked the link attached to the email. The headline read, Blue Streak Shipping acquires struggling competitor Apex Logistics. I laughed. I laughed so hard Emily came running in from the other room to see what was wrong. What happened? She asked. We bought them, I said, pointing at the screen. Blue Streak bought Apex. The irony was perfect. The company that said I was worthless, the boss who laughed at my price, was now being absorbed by the company that recognized my value. And the best part? As a senior manager at Blue Streak, I was going to be part of the transition team. I would be going back to the old Apex office. Not as an employee begging for a raise, but as a conqueror coming to fix the mess they had made. I would walk through those glass doors, past Holloway's old empty office, and I would finally fix the routing system the right way. The day I returned to the Apex building was surreal. The sign out front was already being changed. The lobby looked the same, but the atmosphere was different. The employees looked tired, beaten down by months of bad management. When I walked onto the logistics floor, the room went silent. Then, slowly, people started to stand up. Paul, who hadn't left yet, grinned. Welcome back, boss, he said. It wasn't sarcastic. It was relieved. They knew I knew the system. They knew I cared. I wasn't the guy who pushes buttons to them. I was the guy who kept the ship afloat. I walked to the front of the room. All right, everyone, I said. I know it's been a rough year. But things are going to change. We're going to fix the servers, we're going to get the drivers back, and we're going to get paid what we're worth. The integration took 6 months. It was hard work, but it was satisfying. I implemented the new software, trained the staff properly, and ensured that everyone was compensated fairly. I made sure no one had to work unpaid overtime. I became the boss I wished I had. One day, while cleaning out the archives of the old HR office, I found my old personnel file. I opened it. There, stapled to the back, was the evaluation Holloway had written the week before I quit. James is adequate but lacks vision. Replacement should be easy. Salary increase denied. I took a pen from my pocket. I crossed out adequate and wrote indispensable. I crossed out lacks vision and wrote visionary. And under salary increase denied, I wrote, he bought the company instead. I threw the file in the shredder. It was the final ghost to exorcise. I walked out of the office and down to the loading bay. The trucks were lined up, engines humming. The drivers waved at me as I passed. The system was running smoothly. The Redford shipment was on the dock, handled with care. I drove home that evening with the windows down. The air smelled like rain, just like that Monday morning when Holloway laughed at me. But this time I didn't feel small. I felt infinite. The silence that followed his laugh had changed everything, yes. But it wasn't the silence of defeat. It was the silence of a deep breath before the plunge. And I had surfaced on the other side, not just surviving but thriving. Years later, I still tell this story to young interns who are afraid to ask for a raise. I tell them about the laugh. I tell them about the silence. But mostly, I tell them about the power of walking away. I tell them that a job is a transaction, not a marriage. If the other side breaks the contract of respect, you have a duty to yourself to leave. I never saw Holloway again after the settlement. I heard he moved out of state, maybe to a place where no one knew his name. It didn't matter. He was a lesson, not a villain anymore. He was the catalyst that forced me to become the person I was meant to be. Without his cruelty, I would still be in that cubicle, fixing bugs for a paycheck that barely covered the rent. Emily and I bought a house last year. A real house with a yard and a porch. Sometimes I sit on that porch and think about the two versions of my life. The one where I stayed and the one where I left. The version where I stayed is gray and small. The version where I left is full of color. My phone buzzed. It was an email from the CEO of Blue Streak. James, the quarterly numbers for the absorbed Apex division are up 40%. Incredible work. The board wants to discuss a promotion to Director of Operations. I smiled. I didn't need to practice a speech in the mirror this time. I didn't need to print out charts to prove I existed. I typed a quick reply. Happy to discuss. I have some ideas for the Eastern expansion. I hit send. I looked at the sunset. The journey from the rejected employee to the director had been long, paved with anxiety and vindication. But every step had been necessary. The world tries to tell you to stay in your lane. It tries to tell you that you are lucky to have a job at all. But the truth is, the world runs on the people who do the work. And when the people who do the work realize their power, the whole structure shifts. Holloway learned that the hard way. I learned it the right way. I went inside the house. The smell of dinner filled the air. My daughter, now 3 years old, ran to me. "Daddy," she yelled, hugging my leg. I picked her up. She didn't know about logistics or routing servers or lawsuits. She just knew I was there. And because I had stood up for myself, I could afford to be there. I could afford the time, the peace of mind, and the life she deserved. I kissed her forehead. "Hey, sweetie," I said. "Ready to eat?" "Yes," she squealed. I put her down and walked to the kitchen. I washed my hands, watching the water swirl down the drain. The past was gone. The future was unwritten, but I held the pen. And if I ever meet a boss who laughs at me again, I won't get angry. I won't get sad. I'll just smile, pack my box, and walk out the door. Because I know now what I didn't know then. Their laughter isn't a sign of my weakness. It's the sound of them losing their best asset. And the silence that follows? That's the sound of me winning. So take the meeting. Ask for the money. Know your numbers. And if they say no, if they mock you, if they tell you that you are just a button pusher, thank them. Thank them for showing you that you have outgrown the room. Then stand up, walk out, and never look back. Because the best revenge isn't a lawsuit or a witty comeback, or even buying their company. The best revenge is a life well lived. It's the peace of waking up on a Monday morning without a knot in your stomach. It's the pride of seeing your name on a door that you earned. It's the freedom of knowing that no one owns your talent but you. My name is James. I used to be a logistics manager at a failing company. Now I run the show. It started with a laugh. It ended with a legacy. And everything in between? That was just the logistics of life, getting from point A to point B. And let me tell you, the view from point B is magnificent. If you are reading this sitting in a cubicle wondering if you are worth more, you are. Do the math. Check the market. Prepare your exit. The rain might be cold when you first step out, but I promise you the sun on the other side is warmer than you can imagine. The silence changed everything. But it was my voice that built the new world. Don't be afraid of the silence. Embrace it. Fills it with your own success. Because in the end, the only person who has to live with your career is you. Make it a story worth telling. Make it a viral one. Make it yours.